By surprise today, Amplitude have launched Humankind's second DLC, The Cultures of Latin America. In this video, I'm going to show you gameplay from all 6 of them and the wonders and events and everything else that comes along with them. Let's begin. Firstly, in the ancient era, we have the Caralans, a new builder culture, it's important to note. Their trait is incredibly interesting. It provides adjacency per similar districts. I'll show you how it plays out in a second. Their ceremonial plaza is a very interesting district too. You can place it wherever you like. And their healers are very neat, if not slightly weak, but I think they make up for it. I'll show you as we move through. Firstly, let's talk about their trait though, because this is a very spicy one. Don't forget in Humankind that you keep your cultural traits as you move through, whereas units like this healer may become redundant down the line. Although it's important to note the healer doesn't actually upgrade until the Great Swordsman, and even then you might want to keep it about. The ceremonial plaza interacts with their trait in a very interesting way, but it's important that we understand the trait first. The trait provides +1 food per food district adjacent to another, or +1 gold per money district adjacent to another, +1 industry per industrial district adjacent to another. I think you get the point. Basically, you get more adjacency bonuses from stacking like-for-like districts next door to each other. Here you can see me placing some of the plazas. These are really neat, of course, because you can place them wherever you like, so long as they're along the coast or a lake, I think. So you can't actually just place it in the middle of nowhere, but you can place it far away from your city center. And that allows you to do like I've done here, build districts in better places from the very beginning. Again, you won't have ultimate flexibility because you do need the water nearby, except for rivers. But I found in my playtesting that it worked brilliantly. Here you can see I've built a few districts. They're starting to feed into each other as well. Each food district adjacent to another is providing an additional food. They are very good. Next up, in the classical era, we have Nazca. A simple one, and one that kind of reminds me a little bit of Spain from Civilization 5. Here we have +1 bonus emblematic district slots on territories containing a natural wonder. We also have a very cool emblematic district, the Lines, although maybe a little weak, and then the Headhunters are their unit. Very cheap sort of warrior replacement. We'll move into that a little bit soon too. First and foremost though, let's talk about these Lines. These you really can place wherever you like. No need to put them near water. And as you can see, their yields are fairly straightforward. +1 faith, +2 influence. Not really a lot to go off by itself. However, you can see as I move through this game that it'll start to interact with my other districts as well. My other emblematic districts, pre-existing emblematic districts, are buffed as well, receiving faith and influence. So as we move through the game, as we build more of these, I'll start to build up some more strength here. It goes nicely, I think, overall as well with my trait, but only, of course, if I have natural wonders. And if I do, by God, they are good. And lucky for you, I managed to find one, and I'll show you that in about 30 seconds. But firstly, a quick note on their warrior replacement. It's a very good unit. Honestly, I can't fault it. It's cheap. It's powerful. It doesn't require any resources. Is it the strongest unit in class? No. You will get outclassed. But it's cheap, and it's strong enough, I think. Moving along to their trait though, because this is really what makes Nazca unique. It is the extra emblematic slot for natural wonder. So here you can see I've got the Great Barrier Reef in my territory. And what that allows me to do in just this territory alone, by the way, if you attach others to it, it doesn't count. It's literally just this one, is build 2 of my emblematic districts. Here you can see I've built 2 lines next to each other and they're receiving double the bonus. And of course, this is a trait. So we'll keep this for the rest of the game. A couple of other things that they've added before we move on to the next culture. We received a variety of new events. Here you can see one about cacti, and it moves through. I love it. It's progressive. There are multiple chains to a few of these events at least. I haven't experienced them all, and I don't know how many there are, but it's a nice little flavor element, and it suits the pack fairly well from what I've seen. We've also received some new wonders, and starting off in the Nazca era, we have Pyramid of the Sun, a very cool looking wonder that provides some faith and +2 food on territories, districts, and exploitations. So all districts receive +2 food in this territory, and any tiles that are being exploited from, say, a natural wonder as well, I assume. It does need to be placed down adjacent to a city center. So there are a couple of little things to consider, but that shouldn't be too difficult, particularly this early in the game. I think it's a nice wonder. I think it's fairly powerful. We'll have to see how it progresses as the meta develops, though. Later in the game, we also receive a brilliant stadium, which I'll show you a little bit more of later, but I thought I would put it in here as well, just so that you can see. It's a very interesting one that kind of feeds you events, feeds you influence, or feeds you gold. Again, I'll talk about that toward the end of the video. Next up in the medieval era, we have Taino. One that I thought wasn't very good at first, but now I think they are. They're an agrarian culture in the medieval era, and their trait, as you can see, gives us food depending on how many territories are in our influence. We have an emblematic quarter that provides us with influence so long as we're stable. And then we have their hunters, a ranged unit, and I'll show you some fighting gameplay from them in a minute too, because I think they could be quite good. Again, it's early days, but I do think they're fairly impressive. Let's talk about what they have to offer first and foremost, though. Their trait, +5 food per number of territories in your sphere of influence in city or outpost. There's a lot to it, but basically, you'll be receiving extra food for every territory that's within your cultural sphere of influence on each city. So if you've got 4 territories, that's +20 food, providing those territories are, again, within your cultural sphere. You don't actually have to own them. You just have to be influential over them. The Batty may help with that. As you can see, I've built 2 adjacent to each other, carrying through that wonderful ability that we picked up from Nazca in the previous era, and now I can continue to really chain through those districts. The district itself, I don't think is overly powerful, but time will tell. Their unit, on the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, I think could be quite impressive. It may not even be the best in its class, but it is, again, a cheap, powerful, and pretty effective unit. It reminds me a little bit of the English longbowman, again, to harp back to Civ 5. It's powerful, it's cheap, very effective at offense, and of course, crucially, defense as well. I like it a lot. Again, time will tell. This is not a full review, but it does seem like a pretty good one to me. Next up in the early modern era, Civilization 6 fans will rejoice. It's the Inca, an expansionist culture, and one that kind of delivers everything you need. The Inca are a fairly interesting one. They move quickly along their roads with a +50% movement speed bonus on your units, and for the rest of the game, as part of their trait, mountains will provide you with +3 food, so long as the district is adjacent. So for every adjacent mountain, you get an extra 3 food on that district. It combines nicely with their terrace farm. These things are spicy. I'll show you them soon. They also get extra food from being near mountains. And as luck would have it, I've got some mountains. Here you can see me start to place these districts. It's important to note as well, I'll just add a little caveat here. As I move through this game, I'll start to pick up more cultural policies or shift my ideology to buff my emblematic districts even more. So as we move through, you'll start to see some cumulative bonuses stack on them as well. But here alone, take a look at this. We're an expansionist culture with a district that's delivering a pretty decent amount of either food or industry, depending on where I'm placing it down. It's exploiting adjacent tiles. It's picking up food and industry from the mountains. Mountains innately provide industry. Now they're providing food as well. Of course, it all really fundamentally sits on the mountains. You need them to build your terraced farms, but once you start building them, my God, they are good. They also give a little bit of vision range, which you saw back there. It sort of revealed a bit more of my territory. Their emblematic district is anti-cavalry and a bastion, kind of like a spiritual successor almost to maybe the Persians unit from earlier on in Humankind. It's powerful enough. I haven't used it a lot to fully test it out, but it seems decent. With 43 combat strength, it's fairly competitive in the era too. Next up in the industrial era, we have the Argentinians, a merchant culture. A well-needed money culture in the industrial era. They receive +1 farmer's slot on city or outpost per luxury resource and a trader's slot per strategic resource. It's quite cool, actually. I like that. It's new. It's unique. Speaking of new and unique, did somebody say they want some salted beef? Well, you're in luck, I guess. Here, their emblematic district creates a new resource, salted beef. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And they're a unique unit, which requires 3 horses, but at the moment, at least in this trial version, no gunpowder, is a mounted gunner unit that also applies the suppression status on your enemy, I think just for the first attack. The Argentinians are very interesting. Here, we should probably start with their district, this bad boy, the salted beef. Famous, of course, providing +4 stability per salted beef on all cities and -2% upkeep to our armies. This adds up. It's a cumulative effect. So the more of these districts we build, the more stability we'll receive on all cities. Take note, it doesn't just apply to the city it's being built in, it applies to them all, just like the Soviets' unique district does, and really just like any other luxury would act in the game. In this case, of course, it's salted beef. Now, as we move through, and of course, again, harping back to my wonderful city where I can get 2 of these beautiful beefy districts down, you'll start to see the ability add up. Is it super powerful? I don't know. It's early days. Definitely strong in terms of stability, and if you have a large standing army, you can get a reasonable discount on your units here too. I like it. It's flavorful, it's fun, and it's another unique district that adds a new resource to the game as well. Previously, off the top of my head, I think it was only the Soviets who did that. Now we have the Argentinians, and spoiler alert, also the next culture as well. Their unit is powerful, a little weak in compared to maybe some of the others that it might be coming up against, but as a mounted gunner unit, very strong. Loads of mobility, loads of range. I think it's a pretty tasty one. And then in the contemporary era, we have the Cubans, an aesthete culture added to the contemporary era who like alliances and pharmaceuticals. Let me tell you why. +1 combat strength per alliance on your units, and your ally will also receive +1 combat strength on theirs. You'll also get, just you, the Cubans, +10% influence per alliance. Their emblematic district adds a new resource, but this time it's not beef, it's pharmaceuticals. And their unique gunner is pretty cool. We'll cover them in a bit too. First and foremost, I guess their trait is fairly self-explanatory. The more alliances you have, the more combat strength you'll receive. Your ally will get some too, and influence. So you do want to try and be allying up with some people if you're going to be playing as the Cubans. Not necessarily always something I'm great at, but in this game I had 2 allies for the record, or at least I ended up with 2. Here you can see their unit is unlocked in Insurrection Theory. It can be hard to make the most of some of these contemporary era units depending on your game conditions, so I haven't had much of a chance to test this bad boy out just yet, unfortunately. What I have tested though, and I can cover in more detail, are their pharmaceuticals. Again, this impressive pharmaceutical district adds a new resource to the game. Here you can see it's been added onto the map where I've built the district, and of course we can build 1 in every territory, or 2 if we have a natural wonder because we played as Nazca earlier on. Now, what does it provide? Well, just like the salted beef, we get 1, but now we get 1 pills instead of 1 beef. The pills, I think, could be better, but we'll see. Here you can see they give +1 food per pharmaceuticals per population. So there's a few different layers to it. +1 is the starting, +1 food. Per pharmaceuticals, so how many of these unique districts have you built? Per population on city. That's how it calculates it. That's how it works through it. You can see the district itself, just like the Argentinian one from earlier on, doesn't provide a whole lot of yield. The benefit, of course, comes from actually connecting the luxuries. And as I mouse over them up the top here, you can see how it's sort of playing out at the moment. I'm getting access from 7 cities, +1 food per population, per pharmaceuticals. You can do the math, and also some stability. And it's important to note, actually, that unlike the Soviets, who lose stability from adding their weapons factories, both the Argentinians and the Cubans gain stability from their unique resources. So it's much, much easier to build them. In fact, there's really no downside to it. You absolutely should. Whereas with the Soviets, sometimes you're trying to balance flailing stability. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there is a wonder, not necessarily a Cuban wonder or an Argentinian one, but it is unlocked in the final era. Nice to see another wonder in the contemporary era. As I mentioned just then, anybody, of course, can unlock a wonder in humankind. You don't need to be playing a specific culture to get it. And this one's very neat. The stadium itself creates events effectively, and you can choose what yield you'd like to get off of that event, producing, as you can imagine, things that a stadium might produce, like money, for example, or influence as well, if you consider the sort of cultural significance, perhaps, of events that could be in the stadium, or stability. Again, bringing stability, happiness to your people. It makes sense. It's very flavorsome, and I hope that I can get a chance to really properly test it out moving forward. Thank you very much for joining me today for this wonderful surprise announcement, and a huge thank you to Amplitude. They are absolute legends, and they hooked me up with a trial version. This is not a sponsored video, but they did give me slight early access at a PR release. You are awesome. Thank you for watching.